Hi.
Here we are with our twin glasses. We'll see how it works.
My bridge partner.
So I'll go sit over there. Okay. Mom, thanks for answering these questions for us.
Okay.
And these questions came from different family members who emailed them in.
Did they?
Yeah.
Oh.
So,
So are you recording now?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, what is a favorite memory from your childhood?
I don't have a favorite memory. I would say the thing that I remember most about my childhood that I liked the most was that my dad would arrive home from work at 5:30. My mother would have gone up and gotten showered and dressed and put on her high heels and lipstick and makeup and come downstairs to greet my dad when he came home. And then my brother and I would sit, the four of us would sit around in the living room, and we had a big bay window with Mom and Dad's chairs on each side, and then we'd be sitting in the we had our own little family circle. And every night this was the routine. So the best thing about it was for 45 minutes, nobody picked up a newspaper or a book or anything. That was against the rules. And so we all told what we did during the day and what we thought about it and what we learned or whatever you felt like talking about. We all took turns, and I just think that it was a wonderful memory because we spent time talking to each other. And so that was true on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. And then Fridays, there was usually a high school football game or a high school basketball game. And then Saturday morning, we'd all pile in the car and go to Grandma Miller's house in Ann Arbor. And so I started going to Michigan football games when I was about 8 years old. I was allowed to go with them. And so that was the big deal on Saturday. We'd go visit Grandma Miller, who lived right on the corner, right in the middle of campus. And that was really fun because it was such a festive time to people coming to watch the football game. So it was kind of I think my favorite memory is how routine it was, that we always did the same thing. And so I don't have one memory. I just kind of remember how much fun it was to have every week the same.
Yeah, it sounds so nice. I love that. How about, did you have a favorite family trip?
Actually, yes. I have one big trip that the family took. And so Larry was 15 and a half. He was going to turn 16. So he had his driver's permit. And so I was 12. But Larry and I would sit in the back of the Cadillac that my dad had bought for our family trip. And it was about a 6 or 7 week trip. We left Michigan and drove across the country to San Francisco, and then we went from San Francisco down to Los Angeles, and from Los Angeles to the Grand Canyon, at which point we sold the Cadillac for a great deal more money than we bought it for in Detroit. So, as my dad said, we paid for the whole trip by selling the Cadillac for so much money. But what was wonderful was my mom had planned this trip so beautifully, which was she was really good at things like that. And so every night we would arrive at a motel that she had made a reservation, not a fancy motel, but that had to have a swimming pool. So that Larry and I could go swimming at the end of the day. I don't know, they probably went and sat near the pool and had a drink. I don't know what they did, but I do know that that was a requirement. The motels had to have a pool. And so Larry and I get to work off a little steam from sitting in the back seat. And there was a lot of poking and punching each other in the back seat. It wasn't all wonderful to be his little sister sometimes. And but what I remember was about his being 15 and a half is that someplace in the Rocky Mountains, my dad said, "Okay, Larry, you want to take a turn at the wheel?" And of course, my mother was saying, I mean, Dad was kidding her, but it was a joke because you had to pay attention. It was a very windy road, but he did get to drive part of the trip. If it was a flat part of Kansas or Iowa or where we were, he would drive, and I would get down on the floor of the car because I'd be scared to death to have my brother driving. And so I remember that from that trip. And so anyway, we made our way to San Francisco, at which point we got to the Mark Hopkins where we were going to stay. And my mom and dad said they were going to leave us alone on the 8th floor or where we were. And they were going down to the bar and they were going to have a dinner, the two of them. And we were going to have room service. And so they were happy as could be, and we were happy as could be having room service. And those were the days that you could open the windows in hotels. So Larry and I started making up water bombs and throwing them out the window of the 8th floor of the Mark Hopkins. And we thought that was hilarious. But apparently, somehow or another, they figured out what was happening and where these water bombs were coming from. And so, fortunately, nobody got hurt or got wet before they came up and told us to behave ourselves. So, anyway, that was a wonderful trip because we got to spend a lot of time together, obviously.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah, I loved our trip.
Sweet. I'm gonna push this. Okay.
Okay.
So, Mom, how was love expressed in your home growing up?
Love was expressed in a different way than you would expect, and that my mom was, when I look back on it, not very affectionate and maybe even kind of cold about personal relationships. And my brother Larry said, "I wish that Mom would have told us at least once how much she loved us."
Mm.
So, but in my mind, I never doubted how much she loved me because she was always there. She was supportive. She was quite the intellectual. She made sure that we were all paying attention to the classes and reading a lot and so forth. So, and she was very supportive as far as like reading an essay that I might have written and correcting it and talking about how to make a point better or whatever. She was very, very intellectual. Whereas my dad was very affectionate, and it was always holding my hand or asking me to sit on his lap, or because I think I told you, Claire, that it was just wonderful growing up when I would go into their bedroom and they would have twin beds, and my dad would always say, "Jump in bed with me, I'm going to make you warm as toast." And oh boy, did I love that. It's something I look forward to every day. But as I grew older, it was more sitting on his lap and always patting our fanny or whatever. So I think that he was extremely affectionate, and I enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm. Me too. And how was family conflict solved growing up?
You know, we had practically no family conflict and I mean no. I don't ever remember my parents raising their voice to each other or arguing, and I'm sure they must have participated in that behind closed doors, because nobody goes through a married life without some disagreements. But as far as I knew, I never heard any conflict in our house, which I think is unnatural way to bring up children. But it wasn't until maybe I was in college that I realized other families didn't have this placid upbringing that I did.
Interesting. And what was a difficult situation your family overcame together?
I guess my brother Larry shooting on the neighbor with Mrs. Fielding with the BB gun.
Can you go into that? I never heard of that.
Yeah, that took a lot of negotiation because
He shot her?
yeah, she was out hanging up the laundry. That was when we had laundry lines. Yeah, I think we'll erase that question.
Okay. Hold it. Hold on. Okay, so this is a big question. But I mean,
Let's do it 2 parts.
we'll do it in 2 parts. What has been the most significant change in the world since you grew up, do you think?
I think 2 things come to mind. Number 1, I'd say refrigeration. And, so many people had to depend on the Iceman cometh. But I remember getting our first big refrigerator, that was such a big deal in our kitchen. To have a refrigerator was really big. But, obviously the main answer would be the computer age.
Yeah.
I think that would have been unheard of when I was growing up, and the internet and so forth that we all rely on today was non-existent. So I'd say those 2 things.
Mm-hmm. Here's the easier one. Who is your favorite author?
Oh, Wallace Stegner. And I had the pleasure of meeting Wallace Stegner, but he was already my favorite. But I saw in the paper that he was going to be speaking at Diablo Valley College, a junior college near us. And I was supposed to play tennis that day. And I thought, if I can get a substitute, I'd much rather hear Wallace. And so sure enough, I could get a substitute. And so I got in the car and drove out there. Well, let's say the lecture was at 9 o'clock. And the assembly hall was full of students. And at the time that Wallace stopped lecturing, he said, I'm going over for a cup of coffee in the fireside lounge. So if anyone wants to join me, I'd love to have your feedback. So as it turned out, they were mainly students there, and so they had to go on to the next class. And so I went to the fireside lounge, and there were 2 or 3 people there that got a cup of coffee and left. And so Wallace and I were just sitting talking for as long as we wanted to talk, and it was absolutely delightful. Fortunately, I had read almost everything he'd written, and when I say fortunately, I got to ask him about a couple characters and how he came up with the ideas for his novels. And but the most interesting thing I learned from him that day, I think he had just won the Pulitzer Prize. And I said, well, how is that going to change your life? And he said, it already is changing it. Whereas I used to write, say, 80 words and maybe use half of them, I know now that everybody in the world is going to be reading what I wrote, and I have to be so much more careful. So now I might write 80 words and only use 10 of them. And so he said it's changed my life as an author a lot, because the freedom I used to have is gone.
Yeah, interesting. And what about, along the same lines, do you think is a book that you would recommend that everybody reads?
Ask me the question.
Oh, like what book would you recommend that everybody should read?
Men to Match My Mountains by Irving Stone. which is a nonfiction book about the opening of the West, but it's a real eye-opener. And of course, Donner Party is part of it, but also, why the Silver Kings became what they did, how they built the tunnel through up to Tahoe. And a lot of things that we all take for granted now, but completing them was quite a chore. And so I think this book covers a lot of our heritage.
Yeah, that's great. I think I've read that. I have to make sure. Is it still going? Are you still recording?
Yep.
Okay, let's see. What do you think is your best trait?
Patience. Should I try to elaborate on that? I just think that, I've been teaching bridge since 1980, and the thing that I hear most of all is my students saying, where did you get the patience to stick with us? But it isn't just in bridge. I think it's life in general. I would say that patience is something that I can't say I'm terribly proud of. I just think it's one of my traits that
I totally
use every
agree. Yeah. And what is one of the best decisions you've ever made, and why?
Well, the best decision I ever made, period, was to go ahead and give birth to Claire Lynn, my daughter, because I had to go against a lot of medical advice in order to not have an abortion, and to go ahead and not know for sure what it would be like after she was born, but to go ahead and.
Can you give some background on why people didn't think you should have me?
Well, I was after my daughter Kathy was born. I was hospitalized twice. To the point where I couldn't see and I couldn't walk very well, and so I was hospitalized. And a number of doctors. We were at Highland Alameda County at the hospital at the time at the Highland Alameda County Hospital. So there were a lot of visiting professors that had tried to figure out what was wrong with me. And so after about a year of regaining my strength, and they still couldn't figure it out, but that it was a demyelinating disease of some sort that was probably brought in by pregnancy. And so that was about all I can remember about it, but there was a lot of discussion back and forth and disagreement between the doctors.
Yeah.
And so they came up with the fact that I should not have any more children because this might bring on the onset of this disease, whatever it was, again. And so I was advised not to have any more children. Well, about 6 weeks later, I had to call the doctor and say, well, that advice is a little late, I'm already pregnant. And so he was a good Catholic doctor, a wonderful doctor, and already had 12 children of his own. And so he said, well, I think we can talk this over, and it's really comes down to between you and me. Should we go against the other doctor's advice? And I said, well, let me think that over, because it was kind of an unknown whether it was going to come back. And he said, I think we can make every preparation for you to have full-time help, and there's every reason for you to hold on to this pregnancy, but it's up to you whether you want to take that chance or not. So,
well, I'm happy for that decision. Very happy.
So. But anyway, that was probably the biggest decision I had to make in my life.
Yeah. Okay, how about, is there anything you wish you had done differently?
Yeah, I wish that I hadn't gotten married for a third time. And I think I went ahead and got married because I was tired of dating and tired of, well, dating's hard work. You always have to get dressed up and be on top of your game and whatnot. And I just was tired of not being happily married like all my friends seem to be. And so I went ahead and got married, even though I remember even the day of our marriage, I thought to myself, well, I can always get divorced. And I think I also liked it, a house that we had looked at, and I just wanted to change from Kingsford Drive, and the girls had moved out and went on with their lives, and I was, the empty nest is not to be scoffed at. I think that all of a sudden you are by yourself, and I liked it a lot in the beginning, but I just wanted to be a partnership with somebody, but it turned out that was not a good decision. It was a lot of unhappiness, and so I wish I hadn't done that, but I've learned from it.
How about what has given you the most pleasure or fun in life so far?
I think one of the things that's given me the most pleasure is I've always loved bridge, but sharing that with someone I love, which is you, Claire, it's a bunch of things together. I'm really proud at how you've stuck with it and wanted to improve all the time, but I never dreamed I'd share something I love so much. I really love bridge. It's just fascinating to me, and I love it so much. And then to share it with someone I love so much, that was just extra special. So.
For me too. And what are you most proud?
Well, besides the obvious things, being my two daughters and how successful they were and how much I liked their husbands and love their husbands. So I'm proud of the things that I think most women are. But in thinking back about one of the proudest achievements I had was teaching blind children how to dive. And I had taught swimming a lot at the YMCA and taught swimming to all healthy people. So when I decided to volunteer and teach handicap swimming, the way it worked was the handicapped people would line up on one side and the volunteers would line up on another, and so you never knew who you might get. It might be somebody with cerebral palsy, it might be an adult, it might be a child, or but every week was different. It's just something I've never forgotten, because the mothers were so thankful, the kids were so proud of themselves, and I thought, how great it was to share in that feeling that they were so proud of themselves.
Yeah. Nice. How about, what advice would you have for young adults? Express appreciation for your spouse, for little things and big things. And it's something that we could easily stop doing. And I think that it could be little things like having a cup of coffee in bed, to large things like that I don't want to do is take the car down and get serviced, or that kind of thing. I just want to make sure that I always thank Dick for how thoughtful he is, and a lot of it is just doing things like that, just sort of taking care of, taking the garbage out or whatever, just a bunch of household things, as well as expressing how much I appreciate him as a spouse and as a person. That's good. And where has been your favorite place to travel?
definitely Africa. And I've never experienced any trip like that. It was kind of like taking a college course in zoology, because it was just so much new to fill every sense. But the awe that I had for the wild animals it was just amazing. And besides learning a lot, just having the experience of safaris and living in tents and taking outdoor showers and spending the day riding around in a Range Rover and getting very, very close to the wild animals. And just in general, keeping track of all the different kinds of animals that we saw. And then we got to do a lot of things like seeing a jaguar kill a antelope, and how they store the food and bring them back to your children. And just we got some experiences that I think the normal tourist would not get to go necessarily partake in, but we did. But besides all the wonderful things about Africa, that was, we stayed at a place called Little Mambo, which only had 3 tents. It was very, very luxurious. And that's where Dick proposed to me. And I wasn't so sure I wanted to get married, but when he asked me, I said I'd be honored to be your wife. And so besides all the other good parts about the trip, that was pretty special. That's where we decided to get married.
Nice. What is your dream for your children and grandchildren?
I think my dream for them would be number one, education, which they've already done pretty well. My great-grandchildren, I don't know what's going to happen to them, but I think that we've all honored education a lot, and I certainly feel like that it's very special that they've all either graduated from college or gone on and gotten a postgraduate degree in something.
And how about, this is a big question. What do you think happens after someone passes away?
Well, I have this picture in my mind of kind of like a circle dance, that somehow my mom and dad and Claire and Kathy are going to be there waiting. I'll be either waiting for them or I will have already arrived. And it's just really going to be joyful to see these people that I love.
Mm-hmm. And what do you want to be known for?
That's a hard one. I guess I want to be known as a good person. I don't have any goals that I have. Feel like they're unmet goals. I just want to have lived a good life, and I feel like I have so far.
Mm-hmm. What is a favorite quote or saying?
Sleep knits the raveled sleeve of care. Shakespeare.
Well, can you say that again?
Sleep knits the raveled sleeve of care.
Oh, wow. I like that one.
Well, I think it's so true. Because, you can be so upset about something in the morning when you wake up, sometimes you think, well, what's the big deal? But anyway, I've always loved that quote because it's so true for me.
True. And what was your favorite subject in school?
Well, English. And I had a wonderful teacher when I was in my junior year. And she wouldn't just have us read something. She would sit on her desk and play out some of the parts, like she'd be Madame Defarge and the Two Cities.
Tale of Two Cities, and in that, Madame Defarge is always knitting, so she would actually bring in her knitting, and whatever it was, she would play out one of the parts of whatever novel we were supposed to read, and she just made these novels come to life, and taught us a lot about look for symbolism and don't just read the story for the story itself, but read. You can try to figure out how and why the author is importing different ideas.
Mm-hmm. What would be, or what's a sport that you've enjoyed the most in your adult life?
That would be golf, and I love playing golf for lots of reasons. The sport itself, how difficult it is, but I think the thing that I enjoy most about golf is the camaraderie, and whether it's playing with women my age, that you suddenly get to spend 4 hours with some friends that you would not spend 4 hours with normally. Nobody had 4 hours to several times a week. But the thing that I like most about golf is playing it with my daughter Kathy and watching her learn how. The laughs we've had, maybe partly at her expense, but she's gotten better and better and better every year. And but most of all, it's afforded us the time to spend together and to travel together. And we've gone to golf camps together. Sometimes just the two of us. Sometimes Dick is gone, but that's been great. Maybe spend 5 days going to golf camp and eating every meal together and learning together and laughing at each other. And so anyway, I feel like those moments that I've spent with her because of golf are really, really special for me, because I have gotten to know her in a different way than any other way that I would have. Mm-hmm. So I love being with her.
And how about what hobbies did you enjoy in childhood?
Trying to think if I had any hobbies.
Swimming.
Is that a hobby?
I don't know.
But we're talking about swimming. It's in things that I'm proudest of. When I was at the University of Michigan, we had a group called the Michie Fish, which was quite the group, in that it was extremely difficult to become part of. And let's say 200 or 300 people tried out, and they took 4 freshmen, and I was chosen to be one of the 4, which was really quite an honor and quite a surprise to me. And out of the 4, the 3 of us were from Birmingham High School, and as it turned out, we had a much, much better coach than we ever appreciated, that had taught us a great deal about synchronized swimming. And so I did that at the University of Michigan with, it was extremely time consuming, and we had practice every day from 7 to 9:30, and we had curfew at 10 o'clock. So I had just a really short time to get my hair dry and get back to the Theta house wherever I was living. And if a beau wanted to spend any time with me, he'd be waiting for me when swim practice was over. And so we'd walk home to the Theta house, and it had pillars on the front porch, and right behind the pillar you could kiss goodnight. And by then I usually had frozen hair, because it was winter time. And I hadn't had time to dry it because it would take away time from walking home with my beau. So you had to make that choice whether you wanted dry hair or frozen hair. And
That's funny.
I don't know if that was really a hobby, but swimming has always been a big, big part of my life.
both my brother and I were Olympic aspirants. For a while, we rode the bus into Detroit to the Detroit Athletic Club where we were training. And I can't believe the weightlifting and so forth that we had to do. And we decided it was too much time. It was an hour each way on the bus, so we chose not to. But at that time, I was quite serious about becoming quite a good swimmer. And my brother had won the state championship in backstroke, so we were both good swimmers.
Is there anything else about your family that you would like us to know? About your family growing up, your family of origin?
Well, I talk about how we all sat and talked to each other, and when I think back about my mother, laughingly now say she could have been the president of IBM or something. She loved being a leader, and she was president of the Girl Scouts, she was president of AUW, she was president of the League of Women Voters, but her biggest claim to fame was she was president of the library board when they built a new library in Birmingham. That was a big deal. You know, she was active in several fundraisers. And so she was gone a lot of the time, but very enthusiastic about what she was doing. But the funniest thing I have to remember about her is once a month they go into the Detroit Athletic Club, and they'd have a ladies' bridge game. But then she started going more and more. She loved bridge, and so it was quite a deal to get into Detroit. And she started going 2 or 3 times a week. Now, she ironed my father's shirts, and I remember this, is that he said he was running out of shirts. He was down to the last one that she was supposed to iron. And she said, oh, I'll catch up. And so that night when he came home, he said, well, did you finish ironing my shirts? And she said, well, I'm working on it. And he said, well, that's good, but you've forgotten to take your hat off. And so those were the days when you never went to the city without gloves and a hat on. And so she had the ironing board out and all the shirts, but she had her hat on, and she got caught in the act. And anyway, so that I remember that as being a joke from there on.
And what about in the next 5 years? What are you looking forward to?
In the next 5 years, boy, I wouldn't change much. I'm really thankful of my life every day. I love where I live. I love my husband. I love all the things I get to do, and I particularly love live where I live. It's just wonderful to look around and think, if I won the lottery, there isn't much else I'd even want that I don't have. And so I think trying to stay healthy is the most important thing. Does that answer that question?
Yeah. Last question. How is this been being interviewed?
Well, I talked about things that I haven't even thought about at all recently. So it's been some thoughtful time for me.
Well, thank you for doing it.
We made it. Thank you for wanting to. I thought this was a crazy idea, but it's been fun.
Yeah. Goodbye, family. Okay, here we are, part 2. Because we didn't get to all the questions last time, we ran out of time. I don't think we've talked about Pine Mountain Lake. So when you mention, or when someone mentions Pine Mountain Lake, what does that bring up for you?
Surprisingly enough, it brings up so many feelings of joy. But I kind of surprised myself to think that about the serenity that I feel when the minute I walk into the house at Pine Mountain Lake. I just feel at home and so delighted that
I love Pine Mountain Lake so much, but there are so many reasons that I love it. But one thing is I feel very safe there, even though I really shouldn't, because we've had fires come very close to us a number of times, and we've had to evacuate a number of times. I still feel like there's something about it being small and being confined inside, and then the minute you sit on the deck, you have the splendor of the foothills that is just ever changing, but always so beautiful and quite spectacular.
Yeah.
And but the feeling of tranquility that I have there is something special, and it's probably comprised of a lot of different things. Simple things like I love to have people there and entertain people, and everybody helps, but you don't have to have flower arrangements, and you don't have to have things really special. It's just everybody. It's like one great big happy family there that we all cook together, we all eat together, and we laugh together, and I don't know, we just have time to spend with each other. And so that isn't exactly Pine Mountain Lake, but it's what happens at Pine Mountain Lake. And so it's always fun to have people there, and particularly have my family there.
Yeah.
But I love being there by myself too, because I don't know, I'm just not worried about what anybody else is doing or what they want to eat or whatever happens. When I'm there by myself, it's just a whole different feeling of the solitude and the beauty that I think you have a little more time to appreciate where you are when you're there by yourself.
Yeah, that's nice. And if there was ever to be another boat, an iteration, what are you going to name it?
Well, we've had great fun coming up with a name for the past boat, so I look forward to batting around ideas, and we'll come up with something good. If we ever get another boat, that is.
Yeah, and what would we do on it? Like, what do you envision us doing on the new boat?
Well, pretty much the same. For me, the cocktail cruising is even though it's great at Pine Mountain Lake, it's even better on the boat for some reason. Maybe it's because we're all so crowded together and can't do anything but talk to each other. I don't know why. It just seems like going out cocktail cruising is something we all enjoy.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for doing round 2.
Yeah.
If you think of more stuff, we'll just do round 3. We'll add it on.
Okay. Great. Well, let me just say that I love, I guess I did say that I love both my daughters so much, and they've given so much to my life. And with one sitting right here, which I have always feel like that's my greatest blessing of all, is to have 2 daughters that love me, and I love them so much. So that's the mainstay of my life.
I totally agree with that. 2 daughters is the best part. I do agree.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Till next time.
Yeah.